Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. This is Kyle Hutchison. I'm an account executive here at Tray. I'm going to be running us through the weekly demo today. So just a little bit about Tray, just a general by the numbers. We have over 10,000 people using our platform around the world. Our company is international already. Our three founders are from the UK. About half of our 60 employees are based out of the UK. Engineers and product primarily as well. And then in San Francisco, where Thomas and I are located, is primarily our sales and marketing office. We have some great investors, 12 total, and in a recent round, True Ventures and GGV Capital led it recently. True Ventures has invested in companies like Ring, as well as Blue Bottle, and GGV, companies like Zendesk, Square, and Slack. So some really good backing. In terms of some of the use cases that we fall in is really just across the board as a general automation platform. Marketing and sales, there's so many different platforms, so there's a lot of use cases there, but we go into support and operations and IT and just within the product as well. A nice thing about this slide too, it just really shows kind of across the board the different type of companies that are coming to Tray to automate their business. So we have Fortune 500s on the list here with Snap Inc. and IBM, as well as very well-known brands like FICO and Forbes and Fox Media, as well as really fast-growing startup companies, GitHub, AdRoll, Segment. So just all across the board, some really hot companies are coming to Tray to automate their business and across a whole realm of different use cases. A lot of our partners, so some of these same companies you saw on the previous screen as well, are coming to us for a variety of different reasons to kind of help their business from a partner standpoint, whether it be attract new business, retain existing customers, as well as just open up their total addressable market. So Copper, as you see on the right side of the screen there, if you guys aren't familiar with that company, really a hot CRM, gives you access to a really easy to use CRM platform, and they're leveraging our integration system to basically allow their customers to integrate to any of the platforms that we allow. Outreach right in the middle of the screen there, really fast growing company, they're one of those like wildfire type companies were just growing really quickly, and it was all leveraged off of their Salesforce integration. And they're opening up their total addressable market by partnering with us to basically open up who they can integrate with, like Microsoft Dynamics, or HubSpot, or the list goes on for different CRMs that they can connect to now that they've partnered with us. So outside of just kind of our current customers as well as partners, just a little bit about the integration space as well. So a lot of people, when they think about integration, you might recognize some of these companies, or these are the ones that kind of come to mind, like the Informatica's, MuleSoft, Del Boomi, and what also is kind of, it comes in line with these companies is these softwares are very complex and they're built for developers. And a lot of them were built 10 or 20 years ago. So before the proliferation of APIs, a lot of them were on-prem. And what we're finding is just there's a lot of frustration. The technology has really evolved, but the integration software really hasn't made that same move. And so what we're seeing in the market is the market has really expanded. So long story short, the integration space, integration tools, it's not a new area that we're creating, but the space has not always moved at the speed of business like we've become accustomed to with the other SaaS applications that we use. And so what we're seeing is a lot of these legacy tools like TIBCO and then MuleSoft are giving way to companies like ourselves that are containerless, serverless, fully cloud-based, and just simply don't require coding to operate. So business users like myself can get in the platform and start building integration between tools to make my life easier, or directors or managers of different lines of business can integrate their own tools as well. And so enough of slides, just want to kind of give you guys a kind of a quick glimpse of kind of where we fit in the market. And I'm going to switch it over to Thomas. He's going to run through a few different workflows.
Well, thanks, Kyle. So what I'm going to do today is go over two very basic demos. Since there are a lot of you on the call today, I'm going to keep it as high level as possible, and we're happy to kind of set up time in the future if it's become more interest to you to go into a little more detail. So basically what you see here is our main dashboard. It allows you to create and manage workflows as you wish. One thing to note here is we also have just a few kind of templates that a lot of the beginning users might go through. So these are pre-built templates, workflows that we built for people to reference and use. But the main kind of core of our general automation platform is kind of creating your own workflows and building from spit to the most relevant, kind of triggers that everybody use. I'd like to go through this scheduled trigger as well as some of the automated triggers. So the only difference is whether or not you want to trigger the workflow based on an event or if you want to do a scheduled job. So I'm going to first select the scheduled trigger and show you what that looks like. A lot of customers we see, always want to buy kind of the best tools possible for their team. So this could be, a platform from sales, platform for marketing, and maybe some for kind of your pre-sales or post-sales team. So for example, a lot of customers might use Salesforce as their kind of source of truth, but perhaps their sales teams also uses outreach to reach out to customers, do some marketing campaigns. And these systems, since they're from different companies, they don't talk to each other. So perhaps they want to connect accounts and contacts and just keep them in sync. So with the scheduled trigger, what you can do is set your time interval. This could be, a minute. You can change the time unit to hours, days, weeks, or months. And then you can also change kind of the interval time. So let's say it's run once every 10 minutes. In order to just connect to your Salesforce instance, all you have to do is search for that connector and pull that into the canvas. To connect to your Salesforce instance is as easy as just clicking New Authentication. You can select whether or not you want to connect to your production or a sandbox account. And once you put in your username and password, you'll be able to reuse this over and over again. So I already have mine logged in, so I'm just going to select my account. What I'm going to do here is show you how you can retrieve a list of contact records from Salesforce and then loop through each of them and try to sync this into Outreach. In between there, I'll also kind of show you some of the business logic, easy logic you can add in there. So I'm going to label this Get Contacts. Once you're authenticated to your Salesforce instance, these record and object types will be pre-populated with anything that's available in your instance. So if you have standard fields or if you've created your own custom fields, those will all be available to you. So in this example, I'm going to show contacts. I want to pull back a list of contacts, and then again, you can kind of select any fields that you want about that contact object. So let's just pull back a few. For an example, I want this contact's name. Let's do first and last name. And let's also do email and phone number. So what you're going to see here is I'm going to pull back a list of contacts, and I'm going to loop through each one of them and sync this to Outreach. So what you can do is pass this list of contacts into a loop step. All you have to do to pass information from a previous step to your input is to use this dragger help over here and insert the list of contacts that you retrieve. So what this allows you to do is the tray gives you the flexibility to either go down to a granular level and process each contact one at a time. So each iteration of a loop will go through one contact object, or if you prefer batch processing, you also can kind of skip through the loop step and just process the entire list of contacts. So the flexibility is there for you to decide how you'd like to process your information. So in this example, just to go over briefly, we're going to run this once every 10 minutes. We're going to retrieve a list of contacts, and then we're going to loop through each one of them. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try and search in Outreach to see if this contact already exists. So the logic there is that if this contact already exists, then I just want to update it with information from Salesforce. If it doesn't exist, then I'm going to create a new contact. So similarly, I'm going to pull in an Outreach connector. And then the first step, I'm going to try and find this contact and an outreach, they're called prospects. So I'm trying to find the prospect by email. So I'm gonna list prospects. I'm gonna pass it to filter email is equal to the email that I retrieved from Salesforce. Go here. One second. Let me show here first. Put in the Boolean stuff. I'm gonna add these logic pieces in first. Prospect found. And pull in two more outreach steps. So as I kind of noted to there, if the prospect's found, then I'm gonna update. If the prospect is not found, then I'm gonna create. So let's label these. So again, if the prospect's found, we're going to update it. If it's not found, we're going to create. So some of the things that I was alluding to earlier in terms of the business logic is using this Boolean step, I can check to see if the prospect's found. So for example, you can set conditions such that, let's say with the find prospect step, it gives you the number of prospects found. So if that count is greater than 0, then that means the prospect was found. So this is a condition that you can add to decide if I want to branch to the right or to the left. So if the number of prospects found is greater than 0, that means it's found. So I'm going to branch to the true side. If it's not found, I'm going to branch to the left, which is the false side. So I'm going to create or update. Now let's say I want to create a prospect with information from Salesforce. Let's just change this operation to create prospect. And you see some of these fields that you can fill in. And what we can do is pass information that we retrieved from Salesforce. So these are the 4 fields that I selected in my example. So I'm going to pass in the first name. I'm going to pass in the last name and also email. So as you can see, it's very easy to pass information from one step to the next, and it's easy to kind of visualize what kind of information that you can create and update in various pieces in different systems. So this is a simple example of just kind of looping through each of these contacts, finding them, creating or updating the contact. One of the things that we see customers commonly use too is enrichment tools like Clearbit. This allows you to pass in information such as a company's domain or a contact's email and enrich it with more information for, about either that company or that contact, which allows your sales teams to operate just with more information so that they can perhaps start a conversation in a better manner. So let's say enrich contact. I'm going to enrich this contact by person and company by email. So again, I'm going to pass in the email address here. So what this allows you to do is with this person's email address, I will be able to get that person's, let's say, gender, GitHub, and a bunch of information about that person's work information as well as company information that just allows your sales team to operate better. So with this now, instead of just retrieving information from Salesforce, I can get additional information from Clearbit. So in this create prospect step that I showed earlier, instead of putting in just basic information, I now have the ability to fill in all of these gaps that I may not have had before. So for example, the street, job title and all that, we can start putting it in. So let's say I want to retrieve one of the information that I got from Clearbit. These are all the values that you can retrieve from that, from the Clearbit enrichment step. So to summarize, we went through an example of how to retrieve a list of contacts, loop through each of them, enrich them, either create or update a contact. I also want to show you kind of what I talked about earlier, where the common types of triggers that we see people use are kind of either the scheduled trigger or the automated trigger. So let's just kind of flip this over to an automated trigger from Salesforce. The difference here is instead of on a scheduled basis, retrieving a list of contacts and pushing them into outreach, I'm only going to, trigger this workflow on an event. So what I mean by that is, let's say I only want this to happen every time a new contact is created. I can now select the operation on record create and say, whenever a new contact is created, then I want to trigger this workflow. So in this sense, instead of looping through this, I'm just going to send the contact over whenever it's created. And then instead of looping through all of them, I can just pull these connectors over here and say, every time this new contact is created, I'm going to follow these steps to enrich the contact and either create or update an outreach. And I can now remove the loop step. So as you can see, not only do you get the flexibility to either run these jobs as a scheduled or a batch job, you can also kind of do the same thing on an event base. And it's also very easy to kind of drag and drop and edit your workflow on the fly as your kind of business logic and requirements change. So this is the first example I want to go through. The second one that we see very common too is kind of sales ops and customer support or customer success type of example. A lot of times we will see either customer success teams or customer support teams talk to customers via intercom. Perhaps sometimes these conversations get a little more technical or require help from different departments, and they need to create, let's say, a Zendesk ticket or ServiceNow ticket, something like that. We'll show you how you can easily kind of use our platform to automate the process of creating tickets and kind of passing over the information so that there's no disconnect between conversations. Demo. So again, when I create a new workflow, the first thing I need to select is a trigger. So in this case, I'm going to select intercom trigger. So we use intercom internally as well. It's a very good tool for us to interact with our customers. This allows us to talk to them in real time and also be able to pass information to and from different systems. So let's say we're chatting with a customer and they ask a question that I need to now involve, say, an engineering team. So I want to create a ticket in Zendesk. But it often takes a long time to copy and paste the customer information. Maybe you want to copy the entire chat over so that the engineering team has a reference to the chat history you've already had with the customer. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to use a special command and say, okay, create case as a note, and that will automatically sync my conversations and customer information over to the Zendesk ticket. So on trigger, I'm going to say, when a conversation is noted by one of our users, I'm going to trigger this workflow. Similar to what I did with Salesforce, you can also pull back additional information about that message. So let's say I want to get a conversation. I'll use the ID that I retrieved from the trigger. So this will give me the conversation that triggered this workflow. Perhaps I want to check for a keyword. One of the kind of groups of connectors I haven't gone through yet are helpers. So we kind of went over some of the basic core operators, which are like logical operators like Booleans, looping, and also showed you some of the service connectors like Salesforce and Outreach. But we also have a bunch of these that kind of help business users deal with, say, we want to transform date and time, do things with text or objects. These help you easily retrieve information. So perhaps, let's say I want to see if the keyword is found. I can use a text helper that says, does this contain the keyword that I want? So the operation that I'm going to do is contains. So I want to see that the text that I want to search is the comment that came in through here. So I want to say the conversation body. Does this contain the pattern that I want? So for example, it might be create Zendesk ticket. So if this pattern is found, then I want to go ahead and create that Zendesk ticket. So again, I'm going to use the Boolean branch and say, is that keyword found? I'll pass the result of this search step to here and say if this is equal to true. So this Boolean step allows you to not only compare numbers greater than and less than, it can also let you compare true false kind of values. So what happens is if that keyword is found, then I'm going to go ahead and create that Zendesk ticket. There we go. So create ticket. And as you go through the demo, you'll see a lot of this stuff is once you get your kind of your hands on this platform, a lot of the ways to use it and how to pass information to and from steps start to become very familiar. So previously we kind of passed information from Salesforce to Outreach. Now we're just going to pass information about an intercom conversation over to a Zendesk ticket. So for example, I might want to use the intercom conversation as a description, or I could simply use the subject of the conversation as the ticket description. I can start adding comments in there. Perhaps I want to use conversation, use the body. And again, if there's additional information that you need about the requester or contact information, you can start passing information like that as well. So these are just two very basic examples of common use cases that we see, connecting different systems that might not previously talk to each other, and then showing you some of the very basic, core logical operators as well as helpers that can be leveraged to more easily create these workflows.
Okay, perfect. Thomas, thanks for the demo there. If anyone has questions, feel free to chat them in now. We have quite a few here. We'll go over with the remaining time here, and happy to go over if the questions keep coming in. First question looks like it's coming in from Jeff. So he's asking, what if the app that I'm looking to connect doesn't exist in the list that you went through there? And so where you find the connectors in the list is in the top left section on the workflow.
Oh, first search.
And so you can just start typing in your name there to see if it exists. If it doesn't exist, we have a couple different options. We have universal connectors. So we have an HTTP connector that you can connect to certain APIs. Thomas, do you want to comment on that at all?
Yep. So what this allows you to do is, if any of you are familiar with Postman, this is a very similar function. It allows you to do simple, post, put, get functions that to REST-based APIs. So if you find that you're developing these integrations very quickly, or you're doing some proof of concept, you can use this, leverage this tool to very quickly connect to the APIs that we might not currently support endpoints for. So yeah.
Okay, perfect. And it looks like we have another question here from Melissa, also regarding these connectors, asking if we have such subscriptions for the specific connectors that we have available. And this is more or less like a pricing question. So when you join, depending on what plan level you come on, you have access to all the different connectors that we have available in our platform. Kind of how we bill is based off of different workflows, as well as the associated tasks. So you can see what Thomas went over in the middle of the screen. This would be considered one workflow. And then all the lines that connect the different pieces on the screen, those are considered tasks. So if anyone's made it to our pricing page. Question coming in from Adam, is your FileMaker connector using the FileMaker's data API? And does it require version 17? Thomas, you want to check that?
FileMaker. Let's see. So the data API, I think, so if I pull in the FileMaker connector here, these are the current operations supported with our connector. So kind of alluding to the previous kind of response that Kyle was talking about. A lot of times we develop these connectors with specific endpoints in mind to support some of our customers. If there are additional endpoints that are needed to be built, we can always build this very quickly depending on need. The internal tool that we use to build these connectors is called Connector Press. It allows us to spin up these new connectors and new endpoints very quickly. So the two ways to go about it are if you are on a plan that allows you to request new connectors, then we do build these for you very quickly. And alternatively, if you want to make your own connections to these APIs, you can also leverage the generic HTTP connector. The only difference is that, as you can see, with some of these operations that we built connectors for, all the endpoints that are supported give you the specific inputs, whether they're required or optional, that you need to make these API calls. Whereas with the generic connector, you're going to have to create these objects yourself. So if there are 5 different inputs, you're going to have to create those input objects yourself. So the way the calls will work are exactly the same, just a matter of kind of ease of use.
Another question coming here from Melissa. Can the system search job boards and then generate a lead that can be populated to different CRMs or ATSs? So it's more or less a recruiting use case.
Yeah, so in terms of that, I'd say that's kind of a similar use case to the first one I showed, where we retrieved a list of contacts from Salesforce. So depending on what kind of job board you're asking about, if that job board service has publicly available APIs, then we can certainly either create a connector for that or use our generic connector to retrieve information from that. So the name of the game is as long as this service has publicly available APIs, then we can always connect to it. So that would depend.
Perfect. And it looks like the last question coming in here was asking about the different triggers. Just kind of what on the screen that you went over, there's a list of a bunch of different triggers. What were some of the other manual ones outside of scheduled?
Sure. So the two that I focused on were automated triggers and scheduled triggers. So all of these kind of service-based triggers that you see are based on webhooks. So if it's supported by that service, then we can build a trigger around it. Some of the other ones that I didn't talk about earlier, let's go over them really quick. So with the manual trigger, for example, a lot of times we use this during testing purposes. So instead of running this in a scheduled way or on an event, I can choose the manual trigger and just run it whenever I want to. You can also use our generic webhook trigger. So if you want to send certain data payloads to our workflow, you can use this to send it from any source. Callable trigger allows you to create a trigger such that you can call it from another workflow. So a common use case is that you might have thousands of records. You want to split these into batches and then run them in parallel. You can do that. You can also split kind of your workflows into sub-processes if that's the way you like to organize things. You can also trigger our workflow based on an email. So perhaps you send it to this email address and you want to use an attachment in there or some information in that body to take certain action. You can use that as well. So those are the most kind of a brief overview of all the triggers that we support.
Okay, perfect. Great description there, Thomas. It looks like we don't have any more questions for today's session, so we'll end just around on time. Thanks again for everyone who joined today.